Well, well, well. Look who's back from the dead. On October 31st, 2023, there was a post made on the Steam page of Half-Life Absolute Zero, stating that they've restarted development on the mod and will be releasing a new build on Half-Life 1's anniversary the next month. We'll take a look at that build shortly, but first, let's get a little bit of context for those who don't know. When Half-Life was first shown publicly, it was an instant hit among the people. It felt like a game that would be amazing to play. A first-person shooter set in a science facility where something terrible has gone wrong and you have to fend for yourself. But looking at it retrospectively, the early versions of Half-Life were primitive at best, especially when you look at the 1997 trailers. But primitive doesn't necessarily mean bad, it just meant it was nothing too out of the ordinary. Quake 1 had already come out the year before, and id Software was well on their way to make Quake 2. So Valve couldn't really settle on being primitive. Valve had to be better, or rather, the best. Sometime in its development, Gabe Newell and the team decided that the game needed a full-on overhaul. Scrap some parts of it, keep some of it, and do something better. A year later in 1998, E3 audiences would gaze their sights upon this new version of Half-Life. This looked more graphically impressive, it had a much more dynamic world, and best of all, it looked really fun. Something that internally Valve knew a year ago the game wasn't. Now, it was ready. Just some more tweaking, some fine-tuning and polishing, and the game would be ready for a November 1998 release. But when the game did come out, there were differences. The HUD, the weapon models, the NPCs, some of it was changed even after E3 98. But still, the game was a smash hit. After garnering more than 50 Game of the Year awards after release, it cemented itself as one of the best games ever made. But what about those things that were different before? Even before that, in 1997, when things were primitive, where did all that go? 10-15 years later, we'd get a alpha build of the game, but that wouldn't soothe the community. We wanted to see what else was behind the curtains, and that, my dear viewer, is where Absolute Zero comes in. Absolute Zero is a mod that aims to recreate Half-Life in a way that was shown in 1997 and early 1998. It aims to add back those old models for the NPCs and enemies, weapons. It wants to redo the game's art style that resembles that of the older versions, and of course, it aims to add back in the cut and scrapped levels. Those few that were shown in the old trailers. The mod started development as early as 2010 or even earlier than that. The team behind it is Cobalt 57, and to say that this mod had a rocky development cycle would be a very big understatement. Absolute Zero has seen overhauls itself, redos and renovations of the sort. And even with all that said, I'd say that this mod is of the same legendary status as mods like Dark Interval or Raising the Bar Redux. While many have tried to achieve the same, Absolute Zero has by far seen the most progress done on it. And now with that history lesson done, let's take a look at the new build of the mod that was released on November 19th, 2023. Right off the bat, I gotta say I appreciate the mod letting me choose a few of these options. It lets me choose what the HUD should look like or what the ladder climbing should be like and so on. I left most of it on default but enabled shadows and disabled view tilting. Throughout the whole mod, you'll have this feeling of the maps being oddly new yet familiar as well. And what I genuinely liked about this starting area was how it's the same layout as the retail game, but the art style is drastically changed to make it look like the 97 edition of Black Mesa, especially when you look at the lighting and the textures. The geometry of how the map is made also shares that retro-futuristic look that Alpha Half-Life had before being transformed into the Black Mesa we all know about. I like the little touch about the vending machines having actual real labels on them rather than fictional ones, because they had to change that before release, and also the HEV suit being red, as that's how it was midway through development. While it may be cool to have the whole game transformed like this, where the retail art style and design is changed into the alpha one, Absolute Zero has to go one step ahead and add back in levels that we saw in the trailers and the leaked alpha build. The anti-mass spectrometer looks greatly simplistic and the whole chamber looks quite barren. Now you have to keep in mind that this mod is under development and it'll be like that for a while before it finishes. This is something that I had to remind myself as well while I played through this because I had a few issues of my own down the line. The resonance cascade sequence starts like normal, but this time around, rather than pushing in a Zen crystal, we go into a portal that opens up in the center. One other thing to note is that the mod uses some cut lines in this section which were interestingly left in the retail game's release, but never used. There's this other scientist on the mic that we never hear in the retail version, but his sound files are there.
I'm seeing predictable phase arrays.
Tell him to stand back from the focal stage. That suit won't do him any good if he wanders into the beam.
Moving on, it's standard affair of seeing everything messed up, dead, or on fire. Surprisingly, we don't get the crowbar right away, or at least I didn't get it. Also, the alpha build had this strange type of ladder climbing and thankfully that got removed in the final release of the game. Again, I have to emphasize how much I like this art style. I don't know if retrofuturism is even the right word, but that's the closest I can compare this to. When we meet the dying Ted Barney, we get a keycard that's next to his dead body. Keycard originally would have played a big role in Half-Life, but they were cut later on. But in Absolute Zero, keycards are back and are required to pass through certain areas. Now here's what I gotta mention something. I think the mod really needs to differentiate between the keycards and the keycard terminals. Something like Doom where the doors and the keys are color coded. That way, even if you come across a locked door, you'd know what kind of keycard you need to pass through. Some places in the mod do display the clearance level you need, but that's not always the case. I think doing this will greatly improve navigation throughout the maps because remember, if now there are keycards, then the maps have to be expanded in size to accommodate them, their usage at least. There's backtracking now, which I'll touch on later. So the second chapter has the familiar starting area, but many new rooms and halls have been added to the place. This definitely makes Black Mesa feel like a large place compared to the rooms we've come across in the retail version. The giant lift from before is here as well, and if I'm not mistaken, this area was one of the earliest map designs Valve had made for the game, so of course this would still be here. In reference to the keycards, notice how I used this terminal and now I know that the gate opened up right next to it. But there are some places in the mod where I pressed E on a terminal and I heard a sound, but I had absolutely no clue what got opened or got unlocked. One of the best things that Valve map designers have done in their games is that whenever you interact with the item like a key or a lock or whatever it is, the game shows you what's being activated or unlocked. And I think using that method of design in this mod would greatly help it. One other thing to note is the antitoxin or the anti-radiation pickups. These were cut items removed from the game, but basically they would be useful whenever you'd get hit by a bull squid's attack or fell in radiation or something. There's also a pickup that revives you if you die. Good concept to be honest, but I honestly wonder why Valve cut them from the final game. So this is the part where I kinda gotten lost and I couldn't figure out anything until the very end of the chapter. While I loved the places I was going through, I had no idea where I was going or what I was supposed to do. Earlier I did see an elevator with no power, so I guessed I had to turn the power on and that'll be it. But when I went on this wild goose chase of flipping switches, moving boxes and doing jump puzzles, that by the time I came back to the elevator, I had completely forgotten that I was supposed to power it up in the first place. Sure, while flipping the switches I mentioned, I may have flipped on the power, but I'm not gonna lie, I did not realize it in the slightest. None of this is currently criticism of the mod since it's in development, but honestly, after 13 or so years in development, I'd want to experience better map layouts than this. The layouts do pay homage to the places shown in the earlier trailers of the game. Places that were cut are now here, playable, and that's awesome to see. But in between, I just feel there's a big gap about conveying to the player what they need to do or where to go. The retail game is very much linear and I don't expect this mod to be like that, but I'd really like somehow realizing what I should be doing. Also, one of the major issues in this moving boxes area is that almost all of it looks very much the same. There's no landmarks or anything unique in these places that I could register in my memory as a unique point of interest. I have almost 30 to 40 minutes of footage of me just going back and forth between these places and just killing everything and pressing every button. Even if I exactly knew what to do, I still feel like this chapter drags on for way longer than it should. Halfway through the same looking places, you just start to get tired of what's going on and just want to see something new. Thankfully, at the end, we loop all the way back to that place with the broken elevator which is working now, and that leads us into the next chapter, the office warrants. What I said earlier about some areas being new yet familiar plays a vital role here. The office sections of Half-Life were also some of the maps developed early in its production that stayed in the game in one way or another. The office warrens in Absolute Zero again fuses together what information is available about the chapter along with the retail game. Compared to the previous chapter, the navigation in this chapter is much more streamlined and fun to go through. The office area is very much expanded in the mod, and because of the alpha material now included again, it feels like a proper office section rather than a bunch of hallways and rooms in a linear fashion. One thing I want to include here is that the team has fixed most if not all of the bugs that previously haunted this mod, especially the ones with the level change crashes. In some cases before, you had to use the console to change the levels and whatnot, but now in this build, the starting 2-3 chapters play automatically, and then it automatically shifts you to a late game chapter, and it doesn't crash, which is awesome. It can be understandable if someone still doesn't like the navigation aspect of the mod due to the expanded maps, because that's some of the major criticisms I had noticed in the mod's negative reviews. If you look at it with a more positive outlook, you can chalk up the backtracking and navigation to a sense of adventure and exploration. I myself am the #1 hater of backtracking in games, but honestly, it isn't as bad as some other mods or games. From the freezer area, we head into a vent that basically leads us to the upper floors of the offices. There, we explore around a bit and take in the scenery, and finally move on to the next chapter, Security Complex. Now this chapter is basically some of the leaked alpha maps stitched together to form a coherent experience. This fan room, along with this flooded area, were both part of the 1997 alpha build. Playing this after having played the alpha is very much a charming experience. Every other moment you might be like, oh, I know this place, or oh, I remember this from the alpha build, that's cool. After going through the lower part of the security complex, we head to the surface where we finally encounter the HECU soldiers. Again, like all of this mod, the HECU soldiers also use the alpha material, or rather the alpha models. Here we press a button that might be related to opening a gate somewhere. And just as I was about to get severely depressed about the panther eye being removed, I got jump scared by one right around the corner. And right after that, I came face to face with the HECU gunner sergeant who basically wields a machine gun and takes a lot of hits to die. The combat encounters with the HECU are thrilling to say the least, and fun too, of course. The final room is what I think the rocket launching room. We press the button and then the screen fades to black. Then the mod shifts to one of the late game chapters, which I guess is the equivalent of Forget About Freeman if we go on the layout of the place. Here we have a full arsenal of weapons, but also now the alien grunts are the main opposing force in the map. Again, familiar places with new textures or basically Half-Life Alpha textures made it very fun to experience. Unfortunately though, this was the point in time where I had gotten tired of being lost in the map like the first chapter. This also gave me quite a bit of confusion. Specifically about what to do after I reached this point with Ted Barney. He said to locate the scientist, but I just couldn't figure it out. And by this point, I had enough footage and played enough of the mod to make this video. This new build of Absolute Zero is amazing. Basically, it's everything that was awesome, plus all of the bugs have been fixed. I do appreciate the brutal honesty of the dev team's original Steam post about this mod coming back. The summary of that post is that the team has a newfound energy for this mod and they want to further develop it. All of the original team members are now back and are currently working on the mod. The post was very honest about either this mod would get a proper 1.0 public release someday, or, again, it would die like before. At least they're honest about it, unlike some mods that just stay silent for 10 years and we just forget about them. So yeah, I wish the dev team the best of luck on this already great mod they've made. I hope they further streamline the layout of the maps so simple-minded people like myself can easily move about and enjoy them. And maybe then, I'll have absolutely zero problems with this mod. Did you see what I did there? Okay, I'll see myself out. That's pretty much it for this video. Thanks so much for watching, and a big thanks to these benefactors for supporting the channel: Quiltman, Unusual, 501st Clone Boy, Interloper CS, T-Boy301, TTG, Robocop, Noel, Nobody Important, Franco Senlehi, Chimsboger, Justin Imbergriff, Taiwanesium, Tedasaur, Odakan Nachos, Lamdre, Decoder Mapping, Roadkill, Walter, Taylor, Hobcobbies, NoClick, Geode, Fisher Grice, Hawk Assault, Mistress Paban, Jelen, A Normal Street Lamp, TRR Droid, and Bipolit. Thanks again, and see you in the next one.